Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, where honest conversations still matter. In this episode, we sit down once again with one of our most thought-provoking guests, Jeremy Tindal. This time, we're diving deep into the Charlie Kirk legacy, separating truth, facts, and lies. From Turning Point USA to political rallies across America, Kirk's name sparks strong reactions. Hero to some, opportunist to others, but who was he really? What's the truth behind his message, his movement, and his money? Together with Jeremy, we cut through the noise and take an unflinching look at what's real, what's rhetoric, and what it means for the future of the conservative thoughts in America. Stay tuned. This one's not about taking sides. It's about finding the truth. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me, as always, is my co-host and friend,
Ethan Lowen.
And with us is a very special guest, Jeremy Tindal. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You've been with us before. As a matter of fact, you are our number one recurring guest, Jeremy.
I don't know if that says good things about me or bad things about you.
No, that puts you in the Mid-Maryland Votes Hall of Fame.
I'll take it.
So tonight's topic is we are going to discuss some of the firestorm that has surrounded the Charlie Kirk assassination on the mainstream media and on social media, which seems to be taking over the conversations in every kitchen, living room, bar, barbershop across America. Ethan, what is your take on the assassination of Charlie Kirk?
I was not necessarily aware of Charlie Kirk before he was assassinated. I mean, I certainly had heard the name, but my greater awareness was simply that one side of the political spectrum, their media referred to him as a fascist, and then the other side of the political spectrum, that media referred to him as a potential future Ronald Reagan-esque type figure. But after he was assassinated, I did actually see quite a few of the conversations that he had with college students on campus, a number of his speeches, etc. And quite frankly, the conclusion that I've come to is that I think that the individuals, 35 and under in particular, that for many of them, he was more of a Martin Luther King-esque type figure. And the more I have learned about him, the more convinced I am that there is truth to that statement.
That's a bold claim. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. is a worldwide renowned patriot for civil rights.
Yes.
Charlie Kirk was accused of denigrating the Civil Rights Act. How would you guys respond to that?
I would say that his response to civil rights was not that there was anything wrong with civil rights. As a matter of fact, when you listen to the conversations that he has with individuals, he actually is quite compassionate. Even with students who make choices that he disagrees with, he actually does not criticize them on a personal level at all. What he does is he challenges the way that they're thinking and asks them, is this true? Is this correct? And so what kind of the references that I did hear him make to civil rights, what it really was about was that his statement is that what civil rights has been turned into over the last 15 or 20 years, where it's become not something where we take individuals that are oppressed and given an unfair situation, such as, separate water fountains or not being able to eat at, the same counter because of different skin colors. What he is saying it has turned into is saying, no, we are going to pick this group and we are going to raise them up above all others. In other words, he's saying it's a complete reversal of what civil rights was intended to be and really was throughout really the overwhelming majority of my lifetime.
So I think what you're saying is that the quote that was attributed to him, which was the Civil Rights Act was a mistake, was taken out of context. It was a blurb, a few second blurb, as opposed to a statement that Charlie made, which was actually quite in depth.
Well, and I think he actually did use the quote that is being spread around that, and I might not be exactly right on this, but something along the lines of the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. But then he goes on to clarify it wasn't a mistake because of what it did at the time. We needed it, but we should have just made it very simple, one-line sentence that said all people are definitely equal and there is no more of, separate here, separate there, all that stuff. His point that he was trying to get across is that nowadays the Civil Rights Act is taken and used for things that it wasn't initially intended for, to allow different people to use different bathrooms and all kinds of different sporting event stuff and all that kind of stuff. And that's what he was trying to get across. He wasn't trying to get across that the Civil Rights Act was actually a mistake. He's just saying that what it morphed into over time is what the mistake was.
So one conversation I heard him have with a student is where it was an African-American student, and he was saying to Charlie Kirk that his opposition to things like DEI and affirmative action and these things that are the outgrowth of what eventually ended up happening with civil rights, not during the majority of my lifetime, but over the last, let's just say 20 years. And he basically was saying that Charlie Kirk was being racist for opposing those things. And then Charlie turned around and said, well, let me ask you this. In the NBA, the National Basketball Association, 75% of the players are African American. Tell me this, if there was a quota where 50% of all players had to be white and we had to reduce it from 75 to 50%, would the quality of play in the NBA go down, or would it improve or stay the same? And he stayed silent, and the student started to say, well, it would be the same. And Charlie Kirk looked at him with raised eyebrows, and Charlie Kirk is as white as I am. And he said, let's be honest here, what would happen? And what his point was is that any time that you create a quota system that does not give merit purely based on merit, which is what the NBA currently does do, you are by definition going to lower the quality of that organization. You're going to lower the quality of the product. You're going to lower how good the service can be to other people that it's supposed to benefit. And that to me is seems to be what his actual statement about civil rights, etc., really was.
He's been denigrated for being transphobic, basically discriminates against gays and transgender people, as well as the LGBTQ community. How do you guys respond to that claim?
But he's also very clear that, I think one word he said, how can I hate something that I have a love for, an affinity for? It's like, I love all people, no matter what their choices are. If you're a grown adult and that's what you choose to do with your life, by all means, have at it. That's something you can decide for yourself. The point he tried to get across is that it shouldn't be done to young children, and it shouldn't be forced pronouns on other people, forcing certain types of speech from other people and all that kind of stuff. But he always tried to be very clear about, I don't hate anybody, no matter what choices you make, but don't force that on me. And that always got twisted into transphobic type.
Well, the LGBTQ community is infamous for expressing the belief that to deny them what they believe is their rights, and that means calling them by their preferred genders, their nouns, and what have you, that you are basically exposing them to mental harm or a mental assault or that kind of a thing. So in that context, the LGBT community believed that he was in fact unloving to them. How would you guys respond to that statement?
I would actually refer to it like this. Yet another conversation that I heard him have with a college student. And of course, he had been doing this for 13 years. And what's very interesting is that these college students were coming by the tens of thousands. Like, it was shocking. And what it is they asked him these questions. He did not bring up the subjects. He talked about whatever they brought up. They could have brought up homework, and that's what he talked about. But it's important to note that it was the students who brought up these subjects. This is what was on their minds. This is what was bothering them. This is what they were seeking answers for. And as far as kind of the issues with that, he had a conversation with a student who said, he started out by saying, I'm gay, and then he kind of listed off all of his DEI criteria. And Charlie Kirk said, no, wait. He said, hold on a second here. He said, Don't list yourself by these artificial criteria that you have spent your lifetime being told about, to think this way, and this is what this category means, and this means that this is how you're supposed to feel and view these categories versus this or that. No. He said, you said yet your name was John Smith, or whatever his name was. You say your name is John Smith. You're coming up here and talking in front of all of these people. You are showing your character. That's who you are. That's how you need to describe yourself. All of these other categories put that to the side and show us who you are. And what he was doing is he really was busting, so to speak, the obvious kind of jail cell or oppression that so many children in America have come to feel by being told, here's a list of almost like a caste system like you have in India under Hinduism, so to speak. And this is what it means you are. This is how you're defined. And it seems like children, and not children, I mean, we're talking about young adults here, but young adults were coming to him literally by the millions, and they wanted to hear that. That's what they were asking him about. That's why he kept talking about it.
The other thing that I think is fascinating is he does draw these large crowds like Ethan is talking about, but and the vast majority of these crowds are usually there to support him. They are fans of his or something like that, but he always makes it a policy that if you're here to support me, thanks for coming, but I'm not here to talk to you. If anybody out there disagrees with anything I say, I want them to come up to the front and have a conversation with me first. And I think that's what made him a little bit different. I mean, I do believe that other conservative speakers especially have started doing that since then, but I think he was really the pioneer in bringing your disagreeers up first. And then he sits there and he has calm conversations, no matter how vehemently he disagrees with people, no matter how much people are yelling at him and shouting with him. He has very calm, rational conversations. And not to say that he's usually or ever or whatever successful at changing people's minds, but a lot of times he can at least get them to dial down and match his level and engage in a conversation instead of just a shouting match.
I think that his skills at debating and presenting the ideas and having this interchange, most people would say that he was very skilled at the debate and the intellectual knowledge of the subjects, that this may have contributed to his death in the sense that the far left people who hated him hated how effective he was at getting the message out and getting that message out to the young people that are going to form the basis of policies in the future. How would you guys respond to that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I have not looked this up in official records to verify, but something that I saw was that his organization Turning Point had grown so large and so successful, and obviously the primary marketing that the organization does is just 13 years of him going to all these college campuses, but it had gotten so effective that there were certain months where it was raising more political donations than the Democratic National Committee, which I find absolutely shocking. I never would have guessed that until you look into it and see the sheer number of people that were being influenced by him and becoming members of this organization.
And his skill set at debating. I mean, he was amazingly proficient. I mean, there was not a topic that was brought up that he did not have a very strong opinion based on facts and truths that he believed.
And it was something he put effort into. It wasn't necessarily even natural. Apparently, what one of the individuals who was a friend of his that was being interviewed was a rabbi, and he had said that the night before he was assassinated, he was on the phone with the rabbi, and he was literally running through scenarios to defend Israel against, the sorts of things, I guess, that he typically hears at these rallies. And so, he was being devil's advocate, and he was going back and forth, and he was doing so very aggressively. The rabbi described him as so his ability to communicate was something that he spent a lot of time and a lot of effort developing.
One thing that he's accused of is the quote that empathy is an overrated emotion, or an emotion that he didn't believe in. I know that was taken out of context. What's your guys' knowledge on that?
Basically, what he said is that to have empathy, that means that you understand and you really know what somebody else is feeling, but nobody can ever know what somebody else is feeling. And it's almost a semantics thing, I guess. But basically, he was arguing that sympathy is way better than empathy because it explains to people, it portrays that you don't really understand what they're going through, but you can still sympathize with them.
It's interesting to me that it would be taken out of context as badly as it was and used by people to generate hate towards this man. Why do you guys think that so much hate has been generated towards this man?
One of his biggest things, and the reason he always said that he went around and spoke and invited those that he disagreed with to the front of the line and all that stuff. And I have the quote right here. He says, "When people stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilization stop talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group." And I think that quote, in light of what's happened, is just, it's almost like foreshadowing.
And the truth is that discourse, the exchange of ideas, requires active listening on both sides' parts. You could tell that Charlie was actively listening. Like he actually listened to the people that were speaking to him. I don't know that his critics ever listened to Charlie Kirk.
One of the things that I've noticed is that what they will do is there are memes or kind of like references to things that he said that are negative. But one thing I've noticed about all of these negative comments about him is that no one will put a video of him saying any of these things that he's accused of saying, whereas you can find videos everywhere of him. I mean, they're out there by the hundreds of thousands at this point, and you can hear what he said. None of it lines up with what the accusations are, and none of the people making the accusations are putting any videos of him actually saying it. I find that quite interesting.
The only one that you really did see video of is, and it's disgusting that people jump to this so quickly immediately after his death, but within hours of him, maybe not even his death, maybe he wasn't even pronounced, to the public that he was dead yet, but within hours of him getting shot, people were posting a snippet of a conversation that he had talking about gun control and gun violence. And basically what the long version of what he said is that, we have all kinds of things in our lives that come with risk. And he used the example of a lot of people die every year, unfortunately, from vehicle accidents. But we don't go ban vehicle accidents because vehicles bring so much to our lives nowadays that we understand that there's a risk that comes with it. But then he went on to say a similar thing about guns and talked about how, we understand that unfortunately people are going to lose their lives to gun violence, but it's a right that we have and that we hold dear. And they took that out of context to say he doesn't care about when people get killed through gun violence. So, haha, you get what you got coming to you. You asked for this. And it's ridiculous.
Don't kind of balance out, as is often the case in life with many, many things where we have to balance out positives and negatives. If we don't do the same for guns, history, thousands of years of history all over the globe is very clear that tyranny will be the result. And the person can disagree with that 100%. And quite frankly, I think he enjoyed talking to the people who disagreed with him. Like you said earlier, he would put the people who disagreed with him at the front of the line to have them be the ones who were able to talk. But one thing that he always emphasized is that, in life, there are truths, there are facts, and that we all have a responsibility to pursue them to the best of our ability. It is not acceptable, and it can only lead to a world that is worse off if we don't hold ourselves accountable to truth.
Yeah, and his truth definitely led to the violence against him. Because his assassin was definitely someone who was agitated to the point of using his grandfather's hunting rifle to kill him. And there's been lots of allegations about the assassin, his identity, his political background. All we know for sure is that he wanted to kill Charlie Kirk, and believed he was a fascist. Now, where in the world would this man develop the belief that that Charlie Kirk was a fascist?
Yes.
Our media, and I find it very disingenuous that our media And the liberal left are now going to claim that they never villainized him, they never demonized him, they didn't call him a Nazi or a fascist, or or feed the ego or whatever hatred it was that his assassin had for him. That it was just a sick individual or what have you. But they deny the entire setup that would have led to this man being on a roof with a rifle and killing a father of two and a husband, because he espoused beliefs that he didn't agree with.
It was honestly, one of the great disappointments of my adulthood. When I realized about 10 years ago that the media, what we refer to as the mainstream media, ABC, CBS, et cetera, et cetera, that the level of dishonesty or not reporting the truth, how extreme it is. And I remember it was because I wanted to know about a speech that at then candidate Donald Trump in 2015 had given. And it was a speech where the week before Hillary Clinton had given a similar speech and they covered it in detail. The next weekend, Donald Trump gave, a mirror speech, and they wouldn't say a thing other than that he insulted these people, and they listed off the people he insulted, and that's all they would say. And I had to go on YouTube to find the speech, and when I listened to it, I got the speech. But that is when I realized, wait a second, the completeness with which they wanted to write the narrative and give an impression that fit whatever it is, whomever it is, that's behind the scenes maybe, but wants to have a narrative, how complete it is. And I was so disappointed. And over the next 10 years, since then I have basically done my own research to find the truth. And it is so incredibly disappointing that on all of the controversial subjects that I have gone and done my own research in, I have not one time in 10 years found what we used to refer to as the media being honest at all. And so, I'm not in the lead. While I was not aware of Charlie Kirk before this incident, I am not surprised in the slightest that the information they've been saying about him for 13 years now has not matched up what we see when we listen to his speeches and listen to his conversations.
Well, there is no doubt that Charlie Kirk is one of the most polarizing personalities of the last 20 years. There is visceral hatred on one side and, almost hero worship on the other. Who he is, I think it behooves every one of us to actually do the research and not rely on the bias of a media or social media or any other media. Mm-hmm. But as we talked about earlier, actually looking at his quotes in context, understanding who he was as a human being is vital in order to understand, where he was coming from and who he really was. So one thing we talked about with the bias of the media is there is a pushback right now. Call it cancel culture or whatever you have. But some of the liberal left are getting canceled. They're literally getting canceled. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel recently lost his job over comments he made about Charlie Kirk. Before him, it was Colbert and others. Certainly, there are lots of people on the left that said some vile, disgusting things about Charlie Kirk, and they've been reported to their companies, and by and large, they've been fired. How do you gentlemen feel about that?
Sometimes I think it's a little ironic. Especially when you listen to Zuckerberg's comments about what happened to him during the COVID times and the pressure he was getting to silence conservative speakers or anti-vaxxers or COVID disinformation people or whatever it was. We've seen the right get canceled over and over and over again. I'm completely fine with it whenever it is a private company's personal decision. I know a lot of people are claiming that Trump is really the reason that Kimmel got fired or whatever. I don't buy that, only because I think ABC is big enough that if they had to do that because of pressure from the U.S. president, then I feel like they have the ability to absolutely take that to the Supreme Court and win. I think that they did it because of ratings and pushback and other reasons other than anything the president would have said, or else they would have just taken it, like I said, they would have challenged it in court. I think if a president is applying pressure, no matter if it's Biden or Trump or Obama or Bush or whoever, then I think that's wrong. And that is a actual violation of freedom of speech if a government is doing it. But I do find it hilarious whenever, we'll say a private citizen of a private company gets fired because of, vile and disgusting comments, and then people shout freedom of speech. You obviously understand that they don't know what freedom of speech is, because freedom of speech, the First Amendment, is only there to protect citizens from tyranny from the government, not from your employer.
Correct. And an employer has
has
every
nothing to
right
do
to
with your
fire an employee at will. And if employee is not representing the company in a proper manner that the company believes is appropriate, then they have every right to fire them. It has nothing to do with anybody's civil rights or freedom of speech.
I will agree with the critics of Jimmy Kimmel's firing that it does seem interesting that the comments that he made, while there are so many people, which really is one of the more disappointing responses, is the number of people that have responded on social media, etc., and just with glee at this man's murder. But when it comes to the comments Jimmy Kimmel made, he was not necessary. He was not being happy or gleeful about his murder. It actually was a fairly mundane comment, but it was certainly insensitive. But what the critics are saying, which I do think does bear some consideration, is that the chairman of the Federal Communications Committee, a commission, an appointee from Donald Trump, criticized Jimmy Kimmel for what he said, and after that criticism, he was fired. And so you have a government bureaucrat who is partially in charge of monitoring and regulating TV stations, criticizing an employee of a TV station, and that TV station fires that employee. I actually do understand where that criticism is coming from. I mean, we have had dozens of individuals in our local communities just joyful about this murder and the mockery. But also, last Tuesday at a school board meeting, there was a group of parents in Frederick County, went to the Frederick County School Board, and they basically were protesting the transgender policy that Frederick County has had in place for several years now. And the pro transgender policy individuals came dressed in black with face masks, microphones and drums, and they were cursing out the parents that were there. They were threatening a couple of the school board members with death, saying you should die. When the parents walked away, they were followed with these guys with microphones screaming in their ears. A nearby police station opened up their doors to let the parents in. So there actually is a larger issue that really does exist in our society, and what Charlie Kirk's assassination and the social media response is actually showing something far more unfortunate and dangerous and tragic, quite frankly.
Well, we do know that the assassin, up till about a year and a half ago, was a fairly conservative family member, but somehow was radicalized in the last year. There are reports that he spent a lot of time in a Discord room filled with other Antifa type personalities where they fed each other's hatred in a circular fashion. And there's lots of documentation of that, chat room diatribes and what have you. So, there's no doubt that there is a radicalization of the far left going on, and they are becoming more and more violent. And although it is somewhat shocking, it is a very real threat, or taking on violence as an acceptable way to fight what they say is tyranny.
Mm-hmm. And what is so interesting is that at the same time that all that is happening, the Atlantic magazine, which is one of the standard bearers of the liberal side of the political spectrum, put out an article on June 29th, I believe it was. So just 60 days ago or less. And the title of the article was How Liberalism has created a misinformation bubble and convinced itself to ignore the science. That what is shocking. But what they were referencing was transgenderism. And one of the things that they talked about is that and when the ACLU, another diehard organization from the liberal end of the political spectrum, went to the Supreme Court, and they were asked point blank by one of the justices if medical treatment, child medical treatment for transgenderism helps children. Does it make their mental health better? Does it prevent suicide? And this lawyer for the ACLU looked at that Supreme Court justice and said, "There's no evidence to support that." And so we are watching radicalism occur while both ends of the political spectrum are actually focusing more and more on science that is stating something very different.
You know, the United States is the last bastion of the science deniers where it comes to the LGBT community, because these early transitions of kids is not done around the world anymore. I mean, Sweden, Norway, all of these Nordic countries that were allegedly held up as the bellwether for LGBTQ transitions, none of them are allowing their children to transition anymore. They are simply stopping it, waiting for puberty to happen, then allowing the children to transition once puberty has happened. So, you know, we're the last one where it's barbaric, and everybody knows it. The entire world knows it. But like you said, there's an information bubble out there where the left is convinced that they're right to the point where they're willing to mutilate their own children. But let's get back to the cancel culture itself. How do we feel about that? Because I can tell you from my viewpoint, all three of us are veterans. All three of us served overseas. So the people would have the freedom of speech and the rights under the Constitution that are guaranteed. So me personally, I don't like cancel culture on either side, whether it's right or left. For me, cancel culture is just bullying people into not saying things that I don't want to hear. And I think that people have the right to say what they want to say. Now, employers have the right to do whatever they want with their employees. I agree with that as well. But at no time do I believe that free speech should be infringed upon, because the ideas that are being presented are foreign to me, or even that I disagree with completely or find disgusting. What do you guys feel about that?
In your opinion, Mark, if you had a business and you had 5 employees working for you, and you had one employee that was out there, he just gets off work, he's still wearing his work shirt from whatever business it is that you owns, and he goes and he's spouting off at the mouth about whatever it may be that you don't align with. And, Ethan happens to overhear this. He's like, "Oh, that guy's wearing a Mark Flynn's business shirt. I'm never going to do business." Would you rather know about that activity from your employee, or would you rather just not know that this is going on?
And frankly, if one of my employees was sharing opinions that were contrary to the basic beliefs of my business, I would fire them in a second. So, yes, I agree with that. However, I also don't believe that people should be bullied into not expressing their opinions because they're worried about people getting, or doxing them is another term that's used, where people go on the internet, find them, and release all their personal information so that everybody can know about them. We are a country that values freedom of speech, and I believe we should protect that as much as we possibly can.
And so here's an example, a real life example related to what you're saying. So in Washington County, there was a public school teacher. Can you read what he wrote on his Facebook post?
Yeah, so he wrote, "Charlie Kirk was a racist, xenophobic, transphobic, Islamophobic, sexist, white nationalist mouthpiece who made millions of dollars inciting hatred in this country, excuse me."
This is a public school teacher in Washington County that he's saying to the students of Washington County that, hey, his own students, hey, if you disagree with what I have to say about transgenderism or any of the other subjects that he listed, and if you happen to agree with what Charlie Kirk said about that, then I don't value your life either. I mean, it is such a strongly worded statement. And so what happens then is the question is it appropriate to have this public school teacher continuing to be with students when we know that possibly over 50% of America's public school students, once they get out of school and have a couple more years of maturity under their belt, actually reject the politics that they had learned under the DEI, et cetera, of the typical teachers union public school influenced institution. He did not make that post publicly. It was to a specific, his friends on social media, and just one or more of his friends was so absolutely disgusted that they actually ended up sharing it publicly.
Wow.
What about them?
Well, I would say that guy needs to find some new friends. That's for sure. Yeah, I agree. I think that he is a public figure. He is a school teacher, and he has no right to be sharing those kind of strong opinions where his own students could possibly read that, you know. But that's the same as going to school and putting up a LGBT flag or talking to my students about my sexual activity or what my proclivities are or who I sleep with in the bedroom. None of that should be known by my students. My students should know my name and what I'm teaching that day. That's what they should know about me personally. And these teachers are bringing too much of their personal lives in there and trying to influence these kids. I read a recent stat which was fascinating to me. It said that college graduates, to your point of later on they figure things out, Ethan, 60 to 70% of them repress their conservative beliefs because they believe they would be failed in a class with a liberal professor. 60 to 70% of our kids are like, I got to pretend that I'm a liberal. Otherwise, I'm going to either get failed or I'm going to be ostracized or these far left knuckleheads are going to make my life a living hell. That is a sad state of affairs for the colleges in our country. Well, gentlemen, it's a good conversation. It's a conversation we need to continue to have. I really encourage all of our viewers, whether you believe that Charlie Kirk was a complete fascist, racist, whatever you want to believe, or if you believe he was a saint, I highly recommend that you get involved in actually looking at what he said in context and then have a rational conversation about it. It is only through the exchange of ideas that our country can get better and heal from this grievous wound that we are suffering from with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. My name is Mark Flynn. This is Mid-Maryland Votes. My co-host is
Ethan Lowen.
And our special guest is Jeremy Tindal. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us.
That wraps up
tonight.
this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes, our deep dive into the Charlie Kirk legacy, separating truth, fact, and lies. Big thanks to Jeremy Tindal for joining us again and keeping the conversation real, smart, and fearless. At Mid-Maryland Votes, we're not afraid to challenge narratives from the left or the right, because that's how democracy stays alive. Like, follow, and share for more content like this. And remember, honest debate isn't dangerous, silence is.